Hey guys, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to talk about downwinding with the Foildrive Gen 2. In part 1, I covered my impressions on prone surfing with the Gen 2, so check that out after this video. If you're new here, my name's Dave West and I make foiling videos about prone foiling, SUP foiling and downwinding. And I'll use almost any tool there is to get the most out of the wave. Gen 2, in my opinion, is the best tool out there to get you into downwinding with the least difficulty, both in terms of ability, but also time. In this video, I want to discuss learning curve, logistics, board, foil choices, and some safety stuff. The learning curve. There really isn't anything that comes close to the Gen 2 in terms of accelerating your learning curve in regards to downwinding. Back on the Assist Plus, I used it to get over the biggest hurdle in downwinding, which to me is not the paddle up, it's learning how to read the bumps once you're up. There's a downward spiral that happens if you're learning to downwind via SUP with a paddle, which is the inevitable exhaustion that occurs after multiple failed paddle ups and falls. Effectively meaning that when you're learning, you spend almost no time actually on foil and you don't get enough time to read the bumps and learn that skill. I use Foildrive to bridge this gap. I was doing about 200 meters on foil with the SUP paddle ups, then I swapped to a Foildrive for a month, and by the end of that month, I was doing 10 kilometers with no falls. For me personally, I then swapped back to SUP paddling. On a max battery, you will be able to safely do about 5 kilometers if you're a total newbie. As you get better, a slim performance battery could get you anywhere up to 50 kilometers as you learn to make less and less mistakes. Personally, I do about 20 kilometers without hesitation on the performance, but usually opt for the sport battery. To me, it's the best compromise. It also takes into consideration all the variables that can go wrong, like gear failure that can occur, meaning you'd have enough battery to slowly motor in on your belly. Logistics. Downwinding is time consuming. Learning to downwind is extremely time consuming. The Gen 2 is fantastic in terms of reducing time required to learn as mentioned, but also general logistics. Little things like paddling through a beach break can be really slow on a downwind board as you get washed back in over and over and over. Whereas with the Gen 2, you can motor on your belly and duck dive all those big set waves. With the Gen 2, you can also just pop up on your stomach in the flat and motor out to your wind line, saving you anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes per run. There's also just the time it takes for you to paddle up. Still happens from time to time in difficult conditions that it can take me 15 minutes to paddle up. This is also true of your crashes throughout your run. You can pretty reliably motor up in about 10-30 seconds once you become proficient. The other component is upwind downwinders. Now admittedly, I'm not personally a fan of these. I dislike the upwind leg so much that I don't do them. But this is location dependent. I have friends who are always keen to downwind and our car logistics are really quick and easy compared to other places. Josh Kerr was a great example. He was explaining to me that the time it takes for a car drop in Sydney to do just 7 kilometers could be over an hour of traffic, and that's each way. So for him, upwinders are far more easy in terms of logistics. The last part of logistics is just the pure size of your setup. Check out my Uber downwinder video if you want to see an example of this. Work to treat. If you have a smaller car or can't be bothered dealing with a long board, then it's a great option if you have those limitations. Board choice. Dom Hoskins made a super detailed video about boards with Foildrive that you should check out. My shortened version is you want a board that's at least 5 foot, if not longer, and ideally a little more volume than you would normally use. I would never take my 34 litre Prone 6 board at my weight. It's just not worth the risk. I opt for a 5 foot 40 litre Amos Shapes Sultan Prone or a 5'4" Amos Shapes Cruiser, which is about 34 litres. Getting up with these boards is super easy, even on smaller downwind foils. But it's enough board, if something goes wrong, I can paddle it too without too much effort. Things go wrong in downwinding all the time. Screws come loose, who knows? You need a board that you'd be comfortable for paddle for over a kilometer prone. The length of the board is the most important variable to me, but you still need the volume in the beginner stages, especially for safety in case things go wrong. But it also just helps you to maximize battery time. So for some of you, your wingboard might be a great option, but I ideally would try and get a board. It's going to suit you both for downwinding and for prone. Now, in regards to motor height, this is going to be dependent on your ability. I run it at 12 centimeters. I'd run it at 8 if I could, but the base plates just don't allow that. The better you are, the higher up you want the pod to be. You've got to keep in mind that for downwinding with a Foildrive, you really shouldn't be dipping the pod or using the motor at all. That's the goal. And so running it at 15 is ideal for a lot of people. Running it at 20 is for those who want to use the motor frequently throughout their run. If you run it at 20 and you don't use the motor frequently, all you're going to be doing is dipping the pod fairly regularly, which is going to create a lot of drag. So my advice would be to run the pod as high as you can for your ability. In regards to battery choice, I touched on this. Really, if you're a beginner, you should be on the max battery. And as you get better, you can size down your battery. For those of us who are on the heavier side, I still think the max sport battery is the best compromise in terms of the amount of times you could fall, which could be up to 40, 50 times, which hopefully is not going to be the case, but you still get that boost function. If you go down to the slim performance, you get the boost function, but you don't have a lot of battery life. Watch Paul Cooper's video to see the sort of battery life that you could get out in a surf situation, and then you could sort of cross-reference that to a downwind situation. If you're considering the slim endurance battery, that's a fantastic option for the lighter riders. The one downside is you don't have the boost function with that battery setup. Now, foil choices is tricky because it really depends on what you currently ride. I would ride the foil that you've been trying to downwind on. That's the starting point. Higher aspect ratio foils of 9 or more are much more suited to downwinding in general, and I currently use the 1121 Art Pro and the 1051 Art Pro, even if I'm using the Foildrive or not. These are my normal downwind foils. It's a great thing to be able to actually use smaller foils when you're learning, and the Foildrive helps you to do this. Those big foils can be very slow and cumbersome, and so being able to get up a smaller foil is a huge advantage to learning. Some of those big foils like the 1310 or the 1150 from Axis have so much lift that even in concert with the Foildrive, the thrust of them and the bump ocean can buck you off. Do short runs to test any foils that you want to try, and stay reasonably close to shore just in case you have any difficulties. You'll find the sweet spot for you and the foil that you want to enjoy. You do need to learn some technique if you want a Foildrive in a downwind setting. James Casey has just released a full course on technique in his club, so that might be worth checking out. You do need to know some downwind theory before you blaze out and try and tackle a downwind run with your Gen 2 Foildrive. The main thing is the takeoff. Timing bumps is still important. The technique is reasonably simple. You want to be motoring very slowly, and as a bump goes under you, you'll feel yourself now fall down the back of that bump. When you're in the bottom of the trough, the lowest point, you'll start to need accelerating. You also want your body weight a little further back on the board at this point. You then scoot yourself up the board as you start to plane and gain speed. This ensures the nose keeps down and you start to gain speed. At 95 kilos, I'm full throttle in this moment, and I'm trying to use the boost in this moment also. As this trough starts to become a downhill, you'll quickly gain speed. And at this point, if you're a beginner, keep the board level and don't try and pop up immediately. Just motor along flat on the surface of the water. Once you're up, a lot of people learning, you'll need to cut left or right, otherwise you'll motor straight into the back of the bump in front of you and potentially stall out. The ocean has a lot of energy, and whilst you can motor over bumps, you can also very often stall out or lose heaps of speed. So in general, if you need to motor left and right across the bumps, not straight down them. Or just give yourself a short little boost if you've got a downhill and you're struggling. Once you're up, as mentioned, I think if you want to learn faster, you should let yourself make those mistakes and essentially take your finger off the trigger entirely. And if you want to be really disciplined, you can just turn the controller off totally. But if you only ever see yourself being a downwinder who uses Foildrive, then go for your life. Burn through the motor. You will always end up with shorter runs, but people like Rob Piros, he uses his motor all throughout his downwinders, and he has a blast doing 12-kilometer downwinders on a max battery, and he burns through the whole battery. I personally can use a performance battery, and if I have a good run, I'll come in and I've only used up 10% of the battery. Now, safety. Downwinding is inherently risky, and you need to consider all the same precautions that you would downwind supping. Take a phone, organize backup plans, and other places that you'll meet if you don't make it. Most importantly, ride within your ability. The danger with a Foildrive is somebody who can only do, say, a kilometer run on a downwind SUP can now do a 12-kilometer run. But should you? Should you be 2 kilometers out to sea or more? You should be using the same caution that you would with your downwind setup. But keep in mind, if something goes wrong, you need to be paddling that prone size board for 2 kilometers potentially. It happens and it sucks. I forgot to charge my remote once and it died on the run. I only realized it once I'd fallen. I did manage to turn the remote back on and get about another 30 seconds out of the remote and get myself up. But if I'd come down at that point, I might not have had enough battery in the remote to get myself back up. Mistakes are gonna happen if you downwind for long enough. It's the nature of the beast, so just accept it. Dylan Bez, the former world record pumper who can pump for over 3 hours in the surf, he only made 5 kilometers on a sport battery on a downwind run because he didn't know what he was doing. Fair enough, there is a technique to be learned, and even the best of us will get caught out if we don't know what we're doing. As I say, there is skill to be learned, but it's just nowhere near as physically or mentally demanding as learning it on a SUP with a paddle. Find a buddy and go together. It's always the best fun and the safest option. Now for me personally, I still SUP paddle as often as I can. I do find it more rewarding to have done it under my own steam. But I also have huge amounts of time. I only work 1 or 2 days a week and I have a lot of flexibility. If you're time poor, if you're not as physically fit or as young as I am, the Foildrive Gen 2 is going to be a way for you to get into the sport and enjoy it as purely as you possibly can without all the hindrances that I've mentioned. So for a lot of people, this is going to open up a sport that's never going to get too busy and that's always going to have conditions. Almost anywhere in the world, there's places that you can do this. So my encouragement is if you can get your hands on a demo, go try one. That's all from this video. Let me know the farthest run that you've done with the Foildrive Gen 2 and if it's helped you to bridge the gap in learning how to read the bumps and downwind for longer. Please, as always, consider subscribing to the channel if you find it useful and entertaining. So that's all from this video. As always, have fun foiling.